Chinese is arguably one of the hardest languages to learn. So in this video, I'm going to give you a detailed breakdown of the new study method that I have developed that helps me learn different characters, words, phrases, and meanings at a fast and efficient pace that has really helped me increase my vocabulary and ability to not only know words, but in what context to use them. Because I feel like for any language, the most important part is the implementation of the things that you learn. And this method that I'm using to study Chinese really helps me not only recognize what words are and what they mean, but as well as in what context to use them. So if you guys have watched any of the other study videos that I have made in the past, then you will know that I tend to like to take digital notes, which I started once I entered college and am now studying at Peking University abroad, although I'm originally from the US, and this journey has made it very imperative that I learn Chinese fast and improve it at a fast pace so I can actually take college courses in that language, but I digress. In any case, when I do this method and learn Chinese with this method, I typically do use my iPad, but really you can do this on paper, pen, anything that floats your boat. And when learning any language, especially Chinese, I do feel like it's great to increase the amount of reading that you do. And so for me, a large majority of the vocabulary that I gain and that I learn comes from the reading, and then I use that vocabulary to further expand my vocabulary set, which I will get to in a little bit. But first, let me show you the text that I'm reading right now. Obviously, the type of text that you read is largely going to depend on your level. If you're a more beginner level reader, then you might want to read sort of children's books. But if you're more intermediate or advanced, it might be better to look for articles or certain text online that might interest you, even books. And this is actually the first Chinese book that I am reading all the way through, like an actual novel sort of thing, so I'm pretty proud of myself for that. But in any case, I do recommend finding a subject material that you actually enjoy, because that will make the overall vocabulary garnering process easier, and you're also going to be able to increase your overall reading comprehension for Chinese characters in particular, because they don't have an alphabet. It might be a lot harder, especially for texts that are more advanced, and a lot of beginner texts will include like the pinyin along with the words, so that it kind of helps you read out what that word actually means, because otherwise, if you don't know that word, then you would have absolutely no idea how to even pronounce it, which is quite different from languages that use an alphabet. But in any case, the text that I'm reading right now is like a crime, thriller, murder mystery sort of situation where the detectives have to solve a bunch of different cases, and it's very, very interesting for me and very intriguing. And I feel like because I've studied abroad at PKU for 1 year now, I am at the level where I'm able to not only learn the Chinese, but also kind of enjoy the actual reading. But that may vary depending on where you are with your Chinese learning, and that's totally okay. But in any case, when I do this process, I will typically go through the text, and as I'm reading, if I see any words that I don't know, and because this text is online, it's very helpful because then I can just copy and paste and directly just kind of go in like so. For instance, if we're looking right here, there's one phrase which is probably a chengyu based on what we can see, called yang mei du qi. And if I didn't know what that meant, then what I would typically do is I would copy the phrase and the entire phrase, not just one singular word, because I think it really helps when you learn words, Chinese words and phrases through phrases or sentences rather than by themselves. And I will explain that in just a second. But first, let's go to Google Translate. See here, this is like another list that I was working on for this example. Come and paste it here. And so yang mei du qi. And this is going to have the Chinese and the English. I will typically go through the text and continue going through the text and find phrases like these and copy and paste them onto Google Translate, as you can see here. Notice, however, that most of the time that it's an entire sentence or a couple of words, never one singular word, because I don't think that's a very good way to really expand your vocabulary set, because typically if you have phrases, then you can kind of branch off of those phrases and learn more words from different phrases. And so now going on to that, once I have my list created, I will then add it to a Quizlet, which is something new that I've done. Because in the past, I would just write it down onto my note-taking app, but I think that having it in a flashcard set where I can go back to it and kind of progressively recall and checking off and Xing off the flashcards that I do and do not know has been very helpful. And so using an online flashcard tool has been a progressive step in my overall language learning method and process. I've already added 140 flashcards, and they're typically just phrases or several words or even sentences, because even when it's in a full sentence, I think it's really helpful because that literally shows you exactly how that word can be used in a sentence, which is very useful when you're wanting to use that word yourself. And so here you can see that Quizlet automatically will separate the words that you have reviewed and that you have not. And so I can check off and X off which words that I do know and don't. How I do this with the flashcards is that on one side of the flashcard that I see at first, that contains like the pinyin of the words that I know. And then this way, with the pinyin, I can test myself to see if I actually know how to write that word. And if I don't know how to write the word, then I'll flip the flashcard over, and then that will kind of show me, oh, that's how I write it. And then I'll write it down several times again, just as a review, because I find that it really helps to kind of really associate that word with how to pronounce it, how to say it. Quizlet automatically has that function, and this is not sponsored. You can use any kind of flashcard app that you find helpful. You can even use handmade flashcards, but I do think that digital flashcards are very helpful in terms of organization and being able to track what words you do and don't know automatically. This is the second part, and now there's a third part. Once I have all of these words onto Quizlet, there will be words that I've already reviewed in the past. And so when that happens, I tend to kind of like, obviously when I'm reviewing these words on Quizlet, I'm writing them down to see if I know them. And so this next part is where the note-taking app actually comes in. Each month I typically create a new notebook for my vocabulary words. And so this has August and September, but I do typically have one for each month. Essentially, I have the date, the page, and the comfort level. So I can write down the date of which I reviewed those words, the page that it's located on so that I can go back to it if I ever want to, as well as how comfortable I felt with the vocabulary set. These words that I'm getting and writing down are obviously from the Quizlet, and so this is a process in which I'm reviewing the words in the Quizlet and I'm writing them down. For instance, this is one phrase that I was reviewing. 本来想发短信，叫他过来，后来一想, and then I will blank out. I will mark out the part of the sentence that has the words that I'm trying to learn and that I'm trying to add to my vocabulary. Black is the initial date that I reviewed it on, and then the purple is the following days. And so here I would add September 5th. Here I have the words, and I will create branches of those particular words beneath. So there's a word here, and then so it comes down here again. And so that's where I know that I need to review, and that's blanked out as well. And here's the pinyin if I come back, for instance, because obviously the first time I'm looking at the pinyin through Quizlet, but then the second time, third time, fourth time, if I am using this document, then I will have to look at the pinyin that I added myself when I was adding in that vocabulary. So like 献殷勤, then I would test myself and see if I knew how to write it. And in this case, I do remember. And you see there's a green check mark here. And that's because that means that the last time that I reviewed it, which was on the 4th, I remembered how to write that word. And so that's kind of signal to me that, oh, I don't actually need to review this again. And obviously Quizlet does this as well, but I think this is just like a second layer that helps me, because sometimes because there are just so many words in Quizlet, it's hard to be able to get through each of them and really practice the active recall and spaced repetition. If there's a green check mark, then I will know that I probably don't need to review it again, or at least for a while I won't need to review it again. But for instance, there are other words that may have like yellow squiggles or yellow check marks, which means that I kind of knew the word, but I had to open it and look again just to confirm that I was right. And so I think that it's really helpful to have that signal so I know that which words I need to review, which words are less important, so to speak, or rather which words I actually already have a solid grasp of. And for the first day that I actually write the word, I will also note down how familiar I was with that word, because obviously these are coming from the Quizlet, and so some of them I may have reviewed before, and there are going to be other words that are automatically highlighted in green. For instance, 污蔑, because that means that I knew how to write it, and when I was writing it, it was totally fine. I had a good grasp of it so that I don't really need to review it very often, if at all. And so when I'm reviewing this word, the second part that I had mentioned earlier in terms of how I'm able to further expand my vocabulary is with this one word, I will not only remember how to write it and in what phrase it's used in the example that I provided in my Quizlet or whatever, I will also tend to use like either Google or ChatGPT, DeepSeek, some sort of AI to create a phrase for me or example phrases, and I will look at those, read those, and sometimes write them down because I think that really helps in expanding my knowledge of not only that word, but also other words. And oftentimes, even when ChatGPT suggests a certain phrase, I will actually be able to use that and realize that, oh, there's these other words that I don't know in that phrase that or in that sentence that ChatGPT suggested, and that's further vocabulary that I can either add to my Quizlet or just add beneath in my note-taking app. It really helps you branch off the knowledge that you already have. Like here, for instance, 耿言 was the word that I was wanting to better understand, and then I asked ChatGPT to help me like 造句 or give me an explanation of what this word means. And so here it tells me the basic translation as well as how to use it and the different examples of the phrases of sentences of how it can be used. And I think this is so helpful in understanding words, and I really do recommend taking full advantage of the resources that are available to us, including AI, because it really helps expedite the overall learning process. There are words that may be like kind of like 成语, like idioms that might not be as clear. So if you ever come across a word that you don't know, I think that it's very helpful to write the actual definition in Chinese. Of course, this may depend on how advanced your Chinese is. If you are still starting off, then it might be easier to just write the English definition. I think that just writing the Chinese definition will help me, if I'm going back to that word and I want to know what it means, then I'm reading more Chinese, and so that's just further amplifying my ability to read in Chinese and understand Chinese, which is so helpful in the long run. And so yeah, you can see here, there's more examples. I first reviewed this on the 25th and then the 31st and the 4th. And so at first, these words, some of them were green, some were yellow, and the second or third time I went around, they were green. And so that kind of shows you how progressively I'm getting a better grasp of the actual words that I'm learning and their context. And so here you can see again that the definitions are in Chinese rather than English, but there may be instances where an English word is simpler, and in that sense, for instance, 节俭, like frugal, is just so much simpler and easy to understand, so I just write it down that way. It just kind of depends, and I think that as you learn, if you try to implement this method, you might have a better idea of what instances you might want to write the Chinese definition and in what instances you might want to write the English definition, depending on the complexity of the word. And so that's essentially the method that I've been using to learn Chinese. So the main things that I use are Google Translate, Quizlet, and my note-taking app, as well as ChatGPT or some sort of AI. I hope this helped you in terms of kind of getting a better understanding of how to not only learn particular words, but expand your vocabulary on a larger scale as you learn words. And I know that Chinese is a very difficult language, but I'm glad that we're in this together, and I'm sure that with enough energy, effort, and dedication, you will be able to reach the level of fluency that you're hoping to gain. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like, and if you'd like to follow for more language learning content or follow my journey at Peking University, please consider subscribing. I'll see you guys in the next one.